Alright, so I got to play No More Room in Hell 2 early, and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this 8-player open-world zombie co-op FPS. Just keep one thing in mind, this is an early development build of the game that you're seeing, so you might see some bugs or some performance issues here and there that won't necessarily be in the early access version of the game when it launches on October 22nd. And of course, thank you to Torn Banner for inviting me to their preview event. Anyway, let's jump right into it. You start your sessions by spawning alone and in desperate need of supplies, so you're looking for weapons, ammo, gear, and general pickups that ultimately feed into an overall character progression system. You want to find other players and team up with them to increase your odds of survival, and the game uses proximity chat, which means, you need to be close to the player in order to be able to hear them until you group up. Ultimately, you're looking to complete objectives at different points of interest on the map, meet up with other players in the center to complete some mission-critical objectives, and then extract on a chopper together with all of the stuff that you found during your session. If you're successful, you'll progress with your character and unlock buffs and perks over time, but if you're not, you're going to lose that character to permadeath. That's right, this game has permadeath, so the stakes are pretty high for your character. Since you don't have great survivability on your own, the cooperative aspect of the game is pretty crucial, especially when you're solving some puzzle-like objectives together. It's nothing like in the sense of like you're, rotating Rubik's Cubes, but they can be puzzle-like in nature at times. And I do like the emphasis the design of the game puts on the social and co-op aspect of things, but that means your online experiences will vary greatly when you're playing with strangers, right? Sometimes you'll run into people that are awesome and you'll want to befriend them, you'll want to play with them again. Other times, you'll probably run into some toxic individuals, just like any other multiplayer game. It's important to note that this game is pretty methodic in nature or slow by design. You're not gunning down millions of zombies with giant numbers coming out of them. There isn't lights shining in your face while you mow down endless hordes. It's intended to be more of a classic zombie experience where you kind of remain in the shadows when you can, and you kind of want to ignore combat unless you really need it because supplies are tight. Now let's talk about the zombies themselves. They're generally slow moving and probably can't do math very well, but they do react to what's going on around them. For example, if you fire towards a group around beside them, they'll turn their attention to you. And some zombies are more aggressive and stronger than others, but generally speaking, you're not seeing those fantastical creatures that are zombie themed in maybe some other games. You're seeing human beings that became more traditional zombies. Also, when players die, they become NPC zombies, and they can be pretty tough to put down. I think there's also an infected mechanic on the roadmap for the future of the game, but I don't know much more detail about that. The zombies themselves can have some great sound design at times with visceral noises that will make you want to run or bash their heads in. And their bodies also react in grotesque ways depending on how you're damaging them, sort of like what you want out of a zombie game, right? Personally, I'm kind of finding it refreshing to pop into a zombie game that just sticks to more traditional zombies, but I do wonder if it could be perhaps maybe a little limiting in the long run of the game. So I think it probably depends on how they're tuned, what objectives you're doing, and just kind of how the combat encounters are set up. I think that the core game mechanics all play and feel good, so melee combat is pretty simple, straightforward, but satisfying with a stamina system you have to manage. Gunplay is thunderous, explosive, and healing is straightforward with different healing items, and the co-op satisfaction of doing puzzle-like objectives together, or just general objectives together, is really high. You get that rush of, yeah, we completed that together as a group that you can't really replicate when you're playing solo. And I really like that none of the objectives so far have felt obtuse for the sake of being obtuse or like they get in the way of you playing the game, whereas in some other extraction shooters, it can kind of feel like sometimes objectives are at odds with what you want to be doing in the game. I really love the idea of working with a team of friends or strangers to do things like crack codes to a nuclear facility or rewire power back to a bar that has supplies you need, and I think the core of the game is rock solid, and really that's the most important building block. I'm eager to see how the gameplay is going to evolve over early access. Now the big question for me here is, how much variety is there going to be in No More Room in Hell 2? In this game, you kind of want to avoid combat unless you really need it. Since zombies never stop spawning, and like I mentioned before, you kind of need to preserve your ammo and supplies for the more explosive final part of the session. In practice, this means that the early game is quite slow and perhaps maybe a little too quiet, with you trying to complete different objectives over and over again. Now, repetition is not necessarily a bad thing, especially in a multiplayer FPS game if you're repeating something that's awesome, but for my playtime, it wasn't yet clear to me if this was a case of, man, these objectives are really satisfying and fun to do, or if it's more of like a, here's the checklist to get to the meaty part of the game. But that's kind of because I didn't really have that much time with the game. I was only able to get a couple of hours in. In any case, I'm cautiously optimistic because of the strong core mechanics and the social aspect of the game, but it's definitely something I'm keeping my eye on. By the way, just an FYI, this game will be launching around $30 when it goes into early access. Now let's talk about immersion and atmosphere, and I think that's one area of No More Room in Hell 2 that could use a little bit of improvement throughout early access. The game looks the part, the zombies sound the part, but in general, the world feels a little bit stiff or lifeless. I mean, of course, it's lifeless in the sense of you're surrounded by zombies, it's the apocalypse, but what I'm talking about more is related to the small but important things like environmental audio and visual cues. I think a stronger audio presentation package would really help the game pull off the fear and survival vibes it's going for. Right now, it just kind of feels like there isn't as much of a threat as there actually is. Right now, the game doesn't feel as immersive as it could or should be, but I'd expect that kind of polish to come throughout early access. And at the end of the day, getting the gameplay spot on is more important than the audio-visual presentation. Now let's ask the big question here, is this game fun? And well, when it comes to sequels, some players just want the same thing over and over again. I think if you're just looking at this and you want the No More Room in Hell 1 experience, but with a fresh coat of paint, you're not exactly finding that here. It's too different of a game. But if you're into having a zombie experience with friends that has you working together with the threat of permadeath, No More Room in Hell 2 could be up your alley. Again, I just want to stress and reiterate that this is not a Left 4 Dead style experience where you are constantly blowing out the backs of a million different zombies every 5 seconds. No More Room in Hell 2 is more about strategic survival and risk versus reward scenarios instead of fast-paced chaos. So if all of that sounds good to you, then this might be a game that you're interested in, and I'm eager to play more of it to see how it comes together over a longer period of time, especially with the long-term character and account progression. But right now I want to turn over the focus to you. What do you think about No More Room in Hell 2 so far? Are you excited by what you see? Do you want it to be something else? Do you want it to be different? I want to know whatever thoughts you have about this game. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video or learned something new, be sure to hit like, be sure to hit subscribe, be sure to hit hype, be sure to do whatever all the other YouTube things you're supposed to do. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.